Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? It's a Friday. Hope you're all feeling Friday fresh, D-mob happy, ready to, I don't know, whatever it is that you do at the weekend. Go and put your feet up. I'm off to the golf course this afternoon. Not to play golf, I hasten to add, just going to have a chat about a music video. Yeah, and not me. My son Fred will be filming a music video in the not too distant future. Never done one before. That should be interesting. Good morning to whoever wrote Demolition work over on Instagram. Good morning also to Jim Turner and to Mark Whiting. Join us over in the main chat. If you were here yesterday, you may recall that I was heading off. I kind of finished the show a bit abruptly yesterday because I was heading off to meet somebody for lunch, which I did. Good friend, known him for many years, and we had lunch, a quick lunch for about 3.5 hours. Good morning, Chris Ford, who's just joined us. Yeah, it says good morning, folks. One of the questions that my friend asked me yesterday is, where do you get your ideas? You know, you sit here and talk about, you do your morning monologue 5 days a week, pretty much every day, every week there is. Where do you get your ideas from? And funnily enough, as I was driving back yesterday, I was thinking, it's a good question, and I don't actually have one for tomorrow. Turned on my podcast player on my phone and listening to it through the car stereo. And there was a guy on there talking about artificial intelligence, or AI. And he was talking about the double-edged sword of AI. And the example that he gave was, imagine there's an AI on your fridge. So, for example, you pour out the last of your milk, you throw away the bottle that it came in. Your fridge then, phones up your local Asda, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, or whatever, and says, he's out of milk. Get some more milk on order, would you? That's the upside. The downside, imagine if that then goes a stage further and starts to report your eating habits to, for example, your doctor, or worse still, your health insurance company. Double-edged sword. So having listened to that yesterday, I thought, yeah, I wonder, because when you think about it, AI has already started to make inroads in this industry as we speak. A lot of you guys are running machines now that have got telematics fitted that are monitoring, operating hours, fuel consumption, and various features of your machine. What if they went that stage further and started to monitor you? Now, on the upside, if they were monitoring, we've discussed this in the past. If they were monitoring you for things like fatigue, if they could sense you starting to drop off at the wheels or at the levers, then maybe that's a good thing. What about if it goes a stage further than that and starts to report you for other things? That is the subject today of our morning monologue. Jim Turner says, speaking of the weekend, it's our club's ACMOC Chapter 2, plant working weekend at Sibbertoft, Leicestershire. Plenty of vintage plant, some modern kit, including a D10. Very nice too. I wish it wasn't this weekend, and I wish it was a little bit closer, because I've got a busy weekend ahead. But I will get along to one of these things very soon. I know Fred was looking at one fairly recently up. I'm fairly sure it was up sort of Leicester way. Not entirely sure exactly where it was. Ken Hatcher has just joined us. Morning, Ken. Slight turn in the weather. It was all sunshine yesterday. It's sun behind cloud today. Maybe that'll make it a bit cooler. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Anyway, without further ado, let me roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this show, where it belongs, on the road. Just going to say a quick good morning to Peter McKenna, who's just joined us. Morning, Peter. How are you doing, my friend? Your campaign over on LinkedIn is it's gaining momentum. I like what you're doing. Trust me, I'm watching with interest. Keep up the good work, my friend. It is Friday, the 20th of June. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming. You know all of this. In today's show, Yanmar compact track loaders bring the power. We are off with ALLU. Not ALLU, screening asphalt, when Hydrema met Harley Davidson. And in our latest look back at the European Demolition Association study tour of Italy, we're walking among the work tools at Caterpillar dealer CGT over in Italy. Plus, in my morning monologue today, I've already flagged it up, why AI should stick to monitoring machines, not men and women. Go back to the chat before we go any very much further. Jim says, I'm trying to get a couple of yearly working weekends around my way. Would be great if you could get up and cover them. Count me in. Count me in. Stephen Edwards. Good morning, Stephen. How are you doing, my friend? Good of you to join us. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Chris Ford, are you going, Jim? I'm trying to go on Sunday. Like I was having a day off today, failed miserably. Yeah, well, that's how days off work, isn't it? I'll come back to the question of the day in just a moment, but let me remind you of what it is, first of all. It looks like this. Yeah, our question of the day today comes once again from our resident quizmaster, Mr. Gary Muirhead, who I haven't spotted in the chat today, so I hope he's all fit and well. His question is this: what was your least favourite food as a child? There were certain things I didn't like, Brussels sprouts, celery. No, never been a fan of those. But my personal one, tomatoes. Hated the idea of them, even though I'm not even sure I ever actually ate one as a child. I just didn't like the idea. If I had a burger and somebody put tomato in it, pick it out, throw it away. If I had a salad, I'd eat around them. Didn't like them at all. Now, as a grown-up, they often don't even make it onto the plate. I get them out the fridge and they go straight in my pie hole, never to be seen again. Last week in Italy, I ate tomatoes with virtually everything. What was your least favourite food as a child? Love to hear from you. What do we got? I know we've got one here. Peter McKenna says, believe it or not, Marmite. Yet now I love it. And liver. I can't really stand it now either. Now, see, always loved liver. Always loved liver. Yeah, offal of any description, actually. A bit of kidney with your breakfast. Oh, yes, please. Chris, I'm going. Don't know which day yet, though. Guys, do me a favour, would you? Aim a camera at it like that, would you? That sort of shape. Horizontal rather than vertical. Send me the footage. I'll put some music to it, and we can do the beeswax. Peter McKenna says you can now buy green tomatoes, sweet as a nut, absolutely beautiful. There's I have to say that there's a shop nearby where I live called Arena. It's I think it's Turkish owned. It's like a Turkish supermarket. And I'm a big fan of it, partly because it got us through COVID. When everybody else was running low on stuff, they constantly had things like jars of chickpeas and jars of tomato puree and stuff like that. But because I was going there to get stuff when you couldn't get it elsewhere, you kind of get exposed to what they do. And tomatoes, they have your little red tomatoes. They have your average size red tomatoes. They have those big fuck off beef tomatoes, but they also have boxes of. There's a yellow one and a purple one and a green one and a red one. Just a handful of those. Bosh, as I say, sometimes don't even make it all the way back home. Is it just YouTube? But for some reason, the sound keeps dipping out every so often. Jim Turner said that earlier this week. I've rerouted the sound. I've messed about in the background. And yesterday when I listened back, it was fine. I'm looking at it now. I'm going to do so again just to make sure. Where is it? There we are. I'm looking at it now, and my wave is going out absolutely fine. I'm peaking just as I should. Don't know what's going on there. It may well be YouTube. I don't know. But keep me posted on that, Peter. Very kind of you to bring it up. Jim Turner says, day one seems a better day for me, Chris. If they have the 10 opened up, they'll be worked up by breakfast time. There you go, everybody. If you're going to Sippertoft, follow the advice. Chris Ford, going back to the question of the day. Spinach, celery, and trifle. Trifle. Still don't eat celery or spinach. Trifle is a different matter. Trifle. Loved trifle as a kid. Loved trifle even more as an adult, but not with booze in it. I don't listen. This was before I was a non-drinker. I don't think booze belongs in your desserts. I don't like boozy food at all. And Jim says, yes, Mike, your mic is drifting up and down. I've no idea what's going on with that. As I say, I'll go and hit it with a big hammer over the weekend and see if I can fix that by Monday. I've already done it. I've already taken it all apart, put it back together again. I've also rerouted it through a different manner, and we still seem to be having issues. I can only apologise. Anyway, let's crack on with the show. And by and large, I think the videos play without too much problem. So let's get on with one of those immediately after a bit of this. There's a difference of opinion here. Peter McKenna says rum barbers. Yeah, see, yeah, not for me. Not for me. As I say, even when I was a drinker, not interested in boozy puds. Really not. Jim Turner says definitely celery. Cooked is all right, but definitely not raw. Yeah, both my parents used to crunch on celery. My wife still does it now. Don't see the appeal. And Peter says, I'm on LinkedIn, still having sound issues. I can only apologise. I will have a play, see what I can do. In actual fact, while I'm playing this video, I may try a different routing system. So let me get this video up. This is Yanmar with their latest compact track loaders.
Hi, I'm Riley McKenzie from Quality Equipment and Parts.
I'm Marco Albanese from Equipment East. I'm Jeff from Buckanabe Equipment.
I'm JP Owens from South Alabama, Kubota.
Today I'm excited to show you
Yanmar's new CTL lineup.
our new CTLs are built to outload the competition, and here's how.
With intelligent work modes and smart technology, we make it easy to do a great job every time.
With over 20 Yanmar attachments available, you can work on multiple jobs with just one machine. Check out the 360-degree visibility.
Now you can see more and load more.
I get the impression they'd rehearsed that last part. I've just switched from one microphone to another. Well, it's still the same microphone, but I'm going through a different routing system. Can anyone tell the difference? Am I still coming in and out? If I am, I need to do something a little more severe than that. Jim Turner says, never liked egg custards. See, an egg custard, great. A Portuguese nata, which is basically a Portuguese egg custard, even better. Peter says, I was a celery muncher when I had teeth. Yeah. Does change your diet, your teeth, doesn't it? You know, I know that feeling only too well. We're going to be back with a spot of ALLU in a minute. I don't mean the food. I mean the screening bucket. Back after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, we're off to do a spot of asphalt screening now with the fine folks at ALLU. I'm with Peter. I agree. It looks a serious piece of kit. Yes, it certainly does. Apparently, the sound is sorted. Yeah, I've got. I won't bore you with the details, but this microphone basically goes into a series of interfaces, and I've tried a few, trying a new one, and apparently that seems to be working. Who knew? I've no idea why that's the case. And Peter, going back to the subject of what food didn't you like as a child, but he now says a trifle, egg custard, and yogurts. Can eat them till they come out of my ears. That's probably excessive, but I understand where you're coming from. But trifles, yes, absolutely. There's a Portuguese cafe just down the road from where I am that do their own Portuguese natters. I have to be pulled away from the place because I would eat my own body weight in them otherwise. What do we got here in the chat? Still a lot of dust to come out. Well, when he emptied the bucket, yeah. Well, I would imagine there must be some sort of dust suppression available for it. Dynaset, if you're watching, possible opportunity. Over to you, fellas. Slightly unusual one tomorrow. We're mixing plant with motorcycles immediately after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Now, I've no idea what the backstory is to this, but it is basically when Hydrema met Harley Davidson. Now, I like Hydrema. I think they're a fantastic brand. I think their little dump truck is an absolute star. Really is. I'd rather have the bike. Have a look. Nice bike. Nice digger, but nice bike. Back after this, we're going back to Italy in just a moment. We're going to CGT, the Italian Caterpillar dealer, and we're going to be talking about, well, we'll be looking at work tools. Back after a smidgen of this. So, during the visit to CGT, the Italian Caterpillar dealer, they broke the tour into 4 parts. First part was work tools, which is what we're about to see. We then went on to line of sight and non-line of sight remote controls. We then saw the higher reaches, including the 352, the 340, but also the 323 and the 315. So the smaller, we'll be bringing those to you in the fullness of time. And we also did a bit on after-sale support, built to be rebuilt, and everything else. So all good stuff. But as I say, we started our visit to CGT with work tools, and this is our video of that portion of the visit. Spot the hat. I'm going to go, well, a couple of things I need to address it in the chat. First of all, Stefan says, unfortunately, I had other plans. I would have loved to have joined this study tour. And I'm not just being funny here, Stefan. You missed a treat. You really did. In very different ways. The trip to Japan was unbelievable. That's back in 2019. It was unbelievable, unbelievably good, exciting, interesting, fascinating, memorable, all of the things. But in its own way, the trip to Italy was every bit as good. Getting behind the scenes, I mean, obviously that was the work tools part of Caterpillar, which I'll come back to in just a moment, but getting behind the scenes at Mantovani Benny, VTN and Trevor Benny as well, absolutely fantastic. Getting behind the scenes at Display, who in my opinion are probably the gold standard in world demolition companies these days. Getting behind the scenes and looking at how they operate, I think that was fantastic as well. Just going back to the Caterpillar work tools, maybe this is just me, but I wonder if they are given the respect and the prominence that they deserve. Caterpillar's work tool, I mean, they've got a basically a comprehensive range of work tools, particularly for the demolition industry. And yet I do find that my concentration on all things demolition, or all things Caterpillar, tends to be related to excavators and dozers and wheel loaders. Their work tools are second to none, absolutely second to none. And as I say, there is a complete comprehensive range there. So well worth a look at that. Good morning, Gary Muirhead. And I've just seen it out the corner of my eye. Excuse me one second. I think I knocked over my my sign while I wasn't paying attention, but it had gone back too far with the chair, I think. Peter McKenna says, morning, Gary. Are you well? Good morning, Peter. All good, thanks. How's yourself? Yeah. Listen, it's Friday. We're all demog happy around this place, aren't we? I think we're all firing on all cylinders just in time to wind down for the weekend. Anyway, that's about it for the main part of this morning show. That's the main part of the show, the main part of the week. All over and done with. I'll be back on Monday. But I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe. Seriously, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. And I hope to see you again very soon. Monday would be good. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I will be back immediately after, I think, this. When I was working on the magazine Contract Journal at the end of the 1980s, I had an unwritten rule. It was a rule that I created myself and that I didn't discuss with anyone. If I went out of the office to a site or an equipment manufacturer and was back near my office before 2:30 in the afternoon, I'd go back to work. But if my journey got me back to the area of my office and my house after 2:30, 3 o'clock, I'd go straight home, call it a day. In my head, I always figured that was fair. I'd probably had an early start anyway, and I generally stayed late if I was working in the office all day. And best of all, this was the 1980s. This was before the invention of mobile phones, tracking devices, and GPS locators. There was no Big Brother watching me at all. Today, Big Brother is watching us all the time. And with the advent of AI, that monitoring and scrutiny is going to be even more intense, which to me at least is both a good thing and a bad thing. Let's begin with the brighter side. The transformative power of AI and telematics on the job site. Imagine machines equipped not just with sensors, but with brains that are able to monitor themselves and submit real-time reports. Fuel consumption, idle time, diagnostic alerts. They relay continuous updates. We're not guessing anymore. We have clear data. Take idle time as an example. Studies show that 10 to 30% of fuel in heavy equipment is burnt while the machine is idling. Telematics alone can slash that by 10 to 15% on job sites, saving serious money and cutting carbon emissions. AI enhances this by predicting inefficient habits, optimizing routes, alerting operators proactively, enforcing boundaries as equipment crosses geofences. It's the kind of insight that leads to green and financial gains, better scheduling, and fewer unnecessary runs. Then there's predictive maintenance. AI watches subtle shifts in vibration, temperature, pressure. It anticipates failures, schedules repairs during downtime, and prevents the project halting breakdowns. One analysis shows AI with connected sensors could reduce unplanned downtime by around 25%. Safety too gets a boost. AI-equipped cameras and drones can scan the site, alerting to missing PPE, unsafe behavior, or off-limit zones. Systems powered by machine vision pick up hazards and intrusions in real time, even before human eyes notice them. Thousands of lives and hours might be saved with fewer injuries and compliance violations, all while protecting machines and materials and fuel from theft and vandalism. Beyond equipment and safety, AI digests massive data sets, weather, staffing, performance metrics, projecting timelines and risks with unprecedented speed and clarity. Errors once seen only in hindsight can now be flagged in advance. In short, AI turns reactive management into proactive precision. And this precision empowers site teams to pivot, adapting in real time with real benefits in cost, timelines, and sustainability. All this is powerful. But as they say, every light casts a shadow. AI's gaze is unblinking. And that's where the unease begins. Today's fleet telematics track machines, but tomorrow they could track people. At first glance, monitoring operator efficiency, fuel-conscious adjustments, or workload fluctuations seems judicious. What's harmless becomes invasive when AI drills into minutes spent on breaks, smoke, or toilet stops, or phone usage. Suddenly, Friday afternoons, when work naturally and traditionally slows, aren't courtesies anymore. They're data points. There's value in measurement, efficiency coaching, safety reminders, training prompts, but the line between improvement and micromanagement is wafer thin. When AI flags subjective behavior as substandard, morale erodes. Lunch breaks become suspect. Naturally slower paces become indicative of low productivity. Constant monitoring fosters stress, an unseen cost that's not so frequently measured. Hay fever, sorry. Ethically, privacy matters. The workplace is flexible by nature, especially in environments with inherent risks. Informal practices like stepping away for a breather are part of a healthy culture. But AI quantifies everything. Supervisors could receive real-time alerts on each cigarette break or each idle minute. Accountability becomes transparent, but with surveillance comes a sense of being watched, judged, and micromanaged. Bias risks lurk here as well. AI isn't impartial. Its parameters like idle thresholds, efficiency baselines reflect the designer's minds. Operators with unconventional workflows risk being flagged unfairly. Slower workers, fatigued during heavy shifts, could be labelled inefficient. Yet their real world may be shaped by complexity or site conditions that no sensor could ever understand. Looking from the operator's perspective, trusted veteran slows a bit near the weekend and they face digital censure. A young apprentice takes time to double-check measurements. That gets flagged as well. No one cherishes being reduced to a stat. Data without context becomes judgment without understanding. And wider implications could follow. Worker autonomy lessons. Fear of surveillance stifles initiative. In environments where flexibility spurs innovation, constant monitoring could suppress the very behaviours that drive excellence. All of which raises the question, how do we keep AI's strengths and avoid its pitfalls? How do we leverage intelligent oversight without converting sites into digital hamster wheels? It's important that any such system starts with clarity. AI on site is for safety, optimization, sustainability, not productivity policing. The data should be used for patterns, not pinpointed behavior. Instead of Bob idled 12 minutes a day, the focus should be on site-wide idle time rose 15% on Friday afternoon. That would allow coaching without singling out. Alerts would need to be flexible, recognizing varying site conditions. Not every dip in performance is a breach. Transparency and consent. Show operators what's tracked, why, who sees it, and how it's used. Offer opt-in or opt-out options for certain metrics. The gamification of work and productivity is one thing. Constant and intrusive scrutiny is quite another. Even the way AI delivers its findings should be considered. AI-generated suggestions should be served as guidance, perhaps an efficiency tip or a fuel-saving suggestion, rather than automatic punishments. AI is more than a tool, or it has the potential to be. It's a partner in construction and demolition. It can lighten burdens, sharpen accuracy, and elevate site safety. But left unchecked, it could so easily morph into an instrument of suspicion and control. The question isn't whether AI belongs on site. It's already here. But we do now stand at a crossroads. One path leads to boundless gains, machines that anticipate failures, save millions in idle time costs, keep workers safe and supported. The other leads to perpetual oversight, eroded autonomy, and subtle psychological tolls. For construction leaders, the challenge is clear. Champion the first without slipping into the second. Craft your AI policies with care. Deploy data to support, not stifle your workforce. Keep sensors trained on machines, not on men and women. Let AI help us build safer, stronger, as partners, not overseers, because ultimately humanity must remain at the heart of the site. There you are. And all of that stems from a comment on a podcast about your fridge monitoring your eating habits. Yeah. Garvin over at Mostly Diggers. Since you mentioned sensor, we've had a lad here we call sensor. There's a lad here we call sensor because he only works when you walk past. Brilliant. Well done, sir. Well done. I'm sure I've mentioned it. I mean, I mentioned my old outfit contract journal at the start of that. We had an editor there who we referred to as the pilot light because he never went out. Yeah, that's true. Although I qualify now, I'm sat here most of the time. So let's have a look. Well, let's have a go back here. Chris Ford says, my cat multiprocessor is made by Veracta. Yeah, that's where they come from, which is precisely why the Caterpillar work tools, or the work tools part of Caterpillar, is still to this day based in a place called 's-Hertogenbosch in the Netherlands, because it is the old Veracta factory. And I have to say, I mentioned this while I was in Italy, but I'm going to tell you the story now. Must be 25 years ago, I interviewed Tony Veracta, the founder and the brains behind Veracta. And at that time, now bear in mind, as I say, 25 years ago, he was talking about the day when attachments for demolition wouldn't just be a case of crunching and munching and crushing and cutting and everything else. He was talking about attachments that would manipulate, so you could take out individual bits of buildings. And here we are 25 years later when we're talking about refurbishment and retrofit, and the need for those attachments has basically just come into being. The guy was basically a visionary. He had already seen a quarter of a century ahead of himself. I don't even know if Tony Veracta is still with us. I'd like to think he is. He wasn't a particularly old guy, but yeah, an absolutely smart cookie. Compare that with somebody else who I would consider a smart cookie, Bill Gates, back in the 70s. He's famously quoted as saying, I can see no good reason why anyone would want a computer in their home. Well, Bill, you're right about a lot of things. You were way off the mark in that one. Peter says, this is the best part of the show. If I miss it, I always listen and catch up when Mark rolls it out on its lonesome. Mark gets it off your chest and stick a spanner in the work section. Yeah, that's about the size of it. And I think I mentioned this yesterday. I was actually asked about, I was asked yesterday about where I get the ideas from, which, as I say, in this case, it was listening to a podcast. But I was also, I was asked why I'd suddenly developed a social conscience, why I was looking at things from, often looking at it from an operator's point of view. The reason is that's partly that's my audience, but that is the biggest part of the industry. It's the operators, the operatives, the people that are actually out at work on site. I listen. If you're a company owner or a CEO or a company principal and you're here, you're welcome. You're very welcome. We love to have people here, but ultimately the people out there doing the job, the guys that are on site, dirt under their fingernails, boots worn to a wafer thin sole. Those are the guys doing the work. That's my audience, which is why we talk about these things. Peter says, I reckon AI cameras in vehicles will reduce accidents in droves. as I say, I found it very interesting. I mean, I know nothing about the haulage industry, but I'm learning. I'm learning from Peter, and I'm not blowing smoke up his rear end. I'm genuinely am. He has a campaign to make life better for HGV drivers and those in the haulage industry, and I am watching it with interest. And I think there's a fine line. I mean, we've touched on this before, the idea of having cameras. Mining trucks I'm thinking of here, but why not on road going vehicles? And maybe it already exists, I don't know. But I reported on a near miss in a mine in America because a guy had been up all night. His wife had a miscarriage, and he'd literally been up all night, but he'd gone to work to try and get through another working shift. He'd nodded off. There'd been an accident. Thankfully, nobody died. But it was we're talking about a big mining truck hitting another big mining truck. Could have been catastrophic, not great at all. So that company then installed these systems where they monitor, your eye movement. If you start to nod off, or if you're doing prolonged blinking, which is a sign of you starting to drift off to sleep, and then you get an alert in the cab, and then an alert is going back to head office to say this guy is quite clearly, or this guy or this girl is quite clearly tired. That's a great thing. I think that's that is a potential lifesaver, as Peter has rightly said there. I think where it becomes more of an issue is, for example, you're hiking down the M1 and you stop for a pee break, and about half an hour later you stop for a sausage roll at Greg's, and then half an hour after that you stop off to get yourself a can of drink, and all of that is logged against you. And if that is then used as, this guy is not an efficient driver, look at all the breaks he takes, that's not so great. And I apply exactly the same thing to the field of construction and demolition. If it is monitoring your safety, the way that you operate, the speed that you operate, the revs that you're using, if it's monitoring the fact that you're constantly looking around, gauging where people are and all of that is a positive. I think the day that it starts to say this guy has 15 fag breaks a day, maybe you should pay him less, or maybe you should replace him with somebody that doesn't smoke, then you have a problem. It's a fine line. It's a double-edged sword. And I think one of the things that I'm discovering about AI is we are learning on the fly. What is it now, 18 months or so since ChatGPT first burst onto the scene, and I think we all, look at this, we have access to a free AI. How cool is this? And it was only a few weeks later I think the world stopped back and went, yeah, is that a good thing? Is it a good thing? And I think that's where we are now. And we do have an opportunity to put these things in place. There are lots of conversations going on in the world of politics and AI about putting limits in on AI, what it can do, what it can't do, and so on. I personally believe that we need something similar within our industry, or within industry, but I'm thinking specifically of ours. And I wonder where that will come from. I'm not going to go down the whole unionization route, but if your employer said, we're going to put AI in your machine and it's going to monitor your every move, and we will be able to come back to you and say, you're not efficient enough, you're using too much fuel, you're taking too many pee breaks or smoking breaks, that half an hour that you had at lunchtime where you nodded off in the cab, it was your own time. You're not being paid for it, but that's not going to happen in the future. I think that when it starts to become intrusive, that's where we've got a problem. And as it stands at the moment, as far as I can see, if an employer decides to do that, there's nobody to say, hang on, that's a step too far. I'm willing to work alongside an AI that will keep me safer and keep me productive, but I'm not particularly keen on one that's monitoring my bladder movements. See what I'm saying? AI, they have in-cab cameras on road and off-road vehicles and machines. They can tell when you're not concentrating, can tell when you're doing something other than the task in hand. Again, I'd go back to that. If somebody is hammering down the M1 in a heavy goods vehicle and they're on their phone and the camera picks that up, I'm all for that. And I'm all for them being censured, sanctioned, punished, possibly. But where do you stop? But where do you go from being helpful and safety focused to being intrusive and manipulative? Dan Cullen's just arrived, and his answer to our question of the day, which is, what food didn't you like as a child? Chicken, fish. Never ate them. The joys you've missed. Andy Thornton. See, I remembered. That play on words, I will tell people about that. You paint a dystopian image. Any AI system, such as you suggest, would need to account for presenteeism, morale, the power of helping others at the cost of our own productivity. Yeah. Is anybody thinking about that, though? You know, just extrapolating out the whole AI, autonomy and everything else. You know, as it stands at the moment, there is nothing to stop a manufacturer and ultimately a demolition or construction contractor saying, after today, we are going fully autonomous. You know, we've done our homework. We don't need people anymore. We're going to do that. And there's nobody to stand up and say, well, hang on a minute. That's not going to fly. They could do it. And I think we've got exactly the same with intrusive AI monitoring your performance. Is anybody actually thinking about the ethics of autonomy? Is anybody thinking about the ethics and the potential mental health risks of being constantly under scrutiny? When you see this a bit later in the day, Peter's already flagged up the fact that I chop these shows up into their constituent parts. When you see this published over on LinkedIn and Demolition News later today, and also when you see the YouTube thumbnail, you'll see that I've come up with an image. It's an AI image, bizarrely, you know, ironically. It's an AI image of a guy on a site, but surrounded by eyes. You know, I'll go back to my point about my experience in the 1980s. I could vanish for a couple of hours and nobody would bat an eyelid. You know, if I decided to stop, you know, maybe I was a bit tired, stop on the motorway, take a breather, go and have a bite to eat, have a drink, have a pee, get back on the road. Nobody knew, nobody cared. Yeah, that was fine. Now, not so much, you know, and I know we've got people tracking vehicles, you know, particularly fleet vehicles, so HGVs, but vans as well, you know, tracking the movement of their vehicles. At what point does that become overreach? You know, when they say, you know, you appear to have taken an hour and a half off here, or you went to somewhere that wasn't on your route, what were you up to? Where does that be? You know, what is the dividing line? When is safety and good management become micromanagement and intrusion? Mental health comes with methodologies such as Pomodoro system, which in itself could look like unproductive periods. Pomodoro system. See, I'm thinking Pomodoro. Isn't that a tomato? You've caught me on the hop here, Andy. What is the Pomodoro system? Jim Turner says, and that's why I like to work for smaller firms. I can go in and prove myself, then they leave me alone because they know I make the money. No form of monitoring needed. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. And Jim, you know, each their own. I have no issue whatsoever with monitoring. I actually think monitoring is a good thing. And I will even go as far as to say monitoring of people and their performance is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, if you are on a machine, let's say you're on an excavator for a week and somebody comes, not in a waggy finger, clenched fist kind of way, but says, your fuel consumption was up this week. You might want to ease back on the revs, or you might want to do this. You might want to, whatever it might be, whatever that advice is, that I think is a positive thing. But if you are presented at the end of the week with, it is under our understanding that you thought you spent 47.5 minutes with your dick in your hand having a pee, and we're going to penalise you for that. Now you've gone too far. That's what I'm saying. Stephen Edwards says, that's where I live, Sir Tokenbosch. Is it? I'm trying to do this from memory because it's a long while since I've been there. Do they call it Den Bosch? Den Bosch? I'm fairly sure somebody told me that. Obviously, this is the Netherlands. I do remember the first time I ever went there to the Veractor factory back in the day, flew to Schiphol, jumped on a train down to Sir Tokenbosch, got off the train. Never in my entire life have I seen so many bicycles. Now, you know, I'm largely attuned to the Dutch way of doing things, but I tell you what, even now, you go, and I'm not, as I say, I've not been there for a while, but the last time I was in the Netherlands, as an example, we came back from doing the filming with Z-Quip, and we were due to get on a train back to Amsterdam at 5 o'clock in the evening. 5 o'clock in the evening. If you did that here in the UK, it would be standing room only. You'd probably have to wait for the second train because it was so chock-a-block. We had an entire carriage to ourselves because while we were going along, everybody else was on bicycles. Yeah. Dan says, well, lads, it's Friday. Looking forward to Monday. You got your fresh start, Dan? Let us know. Peter says, my take, spot on. Any meaningful use of AI in the workplace needs to support human well-being, not just squeeze more out of people. Otherwise, it's not progress. It's just pressure. Chat GPT's thought, yeah. I think that phrase there, it's not progress, it's pressure. I think that is the dividing line. My concern is who makes that decision. I think we've got that in a wider context. You've actually got some of the AI companies, including the people behind ChatGPT, asking for government to place limits on what they can do. Basically to prevent them running amok, which seems, you'd have thought they'd have the good sense to not run amok themselves, but they're asking for those limits. I think we need to understand what those limits are ourselves, because as it stands today, as far as I'm concerned, if Balfour Beatty or Mace or Lang O'Rourke or one of the big construction companies says we're going fully AI, and from the moment you step foot on one of our sites to the moment you leave, you will be monitored. And if we don't like the number of smoking breaks you have, the number of pee breaks you have, the amount of time you take for your mid-morning break, the amount of time you take for your lunch, the amount of time that your machine is idle. If you're on an excavator and you've got a bunch of dumpers or dump trucks to fill, if when they've gone away, you're between loads, rather than tidying up, you were sat there twiddling your thumbs. Wait, that's not productive. That's the point with oversight, and oversight to prevent overreach, as it were. Stefan Edwards says both are correct. Sertogenbosch, Den Bosch. There you are. The shit I remember from 25 years ago is unbelievable. Andy says, yes, you're right. It's a tomato. It's a Pomodoro is a tomato. It's also a system where you take a few minutes away from your work, especially desk work, and take a walk. Just get away from the intensity of the job. Guys, a lot of you guys are sat at the controls. Do you do that? I know I do. I mean, for example, my morning here, the bit that you don't see, I'm here, I don't know, 7 o'clock, 7:30, whatever it might be, putting this together. Around about 8 o'clock, when this is 90% pieced together, I go off, I have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea this morning, go and have a shower, get my clothes on, get myself ready for the day. So I've only been up for about an hour, but I take like a half an hour break before I come on and do this. I'm sure you all do that. And some of those are micro breaks. If, for example, if you are loading dumpers or dump trucks, you've fed the last one, the next one is not due back for another 30 seconds. So okay, right, I'm ready to go again, which is perfectly understandable and absolutely fine and should be encouraged, because you do need to keep your physical health, your mental health all in line. If you've got a camera up here or here that's monitoring you all the time, and you know full well that at the end of the week, that could be used to quiz you, at where are we now? At 10:51 and 35 seconds, we detected you taking a break for 36 seconds. Could you explain yourself? Too far. That's that you've gone too far, and now we need to have a quiet word. That's the point I'm making. Dan is doing his online induction today. Good stuff. And yes, new start. See how it goes. We wish you well. I mean, I'm not going to get into the habit of giving you good luck in your new job cards, Dan, because, the nature of this industry means I'd be doing that weekly, which is crazy. But there you are. Jim says, I'm not against monitoring. The fuel consumption thing is a very good example. Take loading off a heap. I have a target of only swinging 45 degrees between buckets. Should never be more than 90 degrees. If I'm not maintaining that, then I'm not operating efficiently. That's where lost time and fuel is wasted. Now, see, that to my mind, is a primary example. And I'm thinking, I mean, obviously, Jim has many, many years of operation under his belt. But imagine that with not necessarily a rookie operator, but somebody that's only been doing it for a few years. If you could take them to one side at the end of a week and say, your fuel consumption is quite high. But if you were to arrange the trucks or whatever it is that you're loading in a certain way, so you're swinging between 45 and 90 degrees and no more, we could get that fuel consumption down, which would be good for you and good for us. I mentioned in that monologue the idea of gamification. You know, if you've got 2, 3, 10 excavators working on a single site or across a company and you're monitoring, that to my mind, that is gamification is a positive reinforcement. You know, if you are one of 10 operators, as I say, on a site or in a company, and your productivity against your fuel consumption is being monitored, and at the end of the week, at the end of the month, every year or something, somebody comes along and says, you produced more, burnt less fuel, here's an Amazon voucher, here's a pat on the back, here's a trophy for your mantelpiece, whatever it might be. That, to my mind, is positive reinforcement, is positive monitoring, and I think that's contributing to you, contributing to the company, contributing to the environment, and so on down the line. It's where you go further than that I start to have an issue. Now, Peter has just said, ChatGPT has shown your good side. I think you will like it. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Have you sent me a thing? Yes, he has. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that, but that's me having been spat out of ChatGPT. Looks a lot like me, only slightly more devilishly handsome. Yeah. Mike Wolf. Good morning, Mr. Wolf. How are you doing, mate? Back in the late 1920s, I think, Ford would measure how long workers would spend in the toilet away from the production line and would have wages docked accordingly. This proved a distinct disincentive to productivity, and the idea was canned. Yeah. See, I do think it's one of those things. It could go either way. You could become, afraid of all things. I will not go for a pee. I'll cross my legs and keep my fingers crossed, and I'll work through because I don't want to fall foul of the system. Or you could go the other way and just say, oh, bollocks. I'm only going for a pee, but while I'm here, I'm going to have a cup of tea as well. Up yours, AI. Could go either way. Disincentive. And bearing in mind, I think one of the things that triggered this in my head, Mike there is talking about the 1920s. Obviously, that oversight and that monitoring would have been done by human beings. You'd have had a supervisor, a line supervisor, or a site supervisor. The system we have within construction and demolition now is not the same. This is something we touched on quite a bit on this show. The fact that a site supervisor or a project manager seems to spend an inordinate amount of time actually tucked away in a site cabin. So that idea of sort of being out and, you're doing that wrong, you're doing that right, well done, and that kind of thing, I think that's kind of slipped into the background to the point where we have, systems, beacons to say he's wearing his seatbelt or not, as the case may be, and so on down the line. Even different things like different coloured hard hats, so you can see from a long distance, i.e. out the window of your site cabin, oh, he's a white hat, he's a black hat, and they're where they need to be. If you switch that over to AI, the change is remarkable, because it's not just a case of, Garvin said, there's a guy on his site they call sensor because he only works when people walk past. That, there is that temptation within demolition construction. If you're tucked away in a corner, you kind of do as much as is needed. In the age of AI, that won't be an option anymore. You will be expected to deliver pretty much non-stop for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And there will be no escape from the all-seeing eye of AI. Too many folk nowadays on site taking muck for a spin. Lots of inefficiencies. A lot are shown on promotional footage too. Yeah, they are. And all. I wonder. Hay fever's driving my nose mad. I've not been through one of these training courses. When you're taught to operate a machine, this lever or this joystick does that. That joystick does that. This pedal does that. Here's how you go through your GPS system, whatever it might be. Is anybody now teaching, the optimum location for a dump truck? Or is that something you pick up along the way? I honestly don't know. Mark Fitz, office bods are doomed. Well, it has the potential It has the potential of eliminating that level of management. If all they're doing is shuffling paper and monitoring what's happening on site, well, you could do that to AI. You could absolutely do that to AI. There was a thought in my head just then, and I can't remember what it was. I'll come back to it if I think of it. Where was I going with that? No, it's gone. Whatever it was I was about to say has gone completely out my head. It does make me wonder about the future, though. It really does make me wonder about the future of the way that jobs are organised and ultimately managed. You know, we do have that hierarchy system now where, you know, you as operators and operatives are overseen by a person who reports back to a person who reports back potentially to head office. Does head office actually need those bits? If your machine and your AI is reporting directly back to them, what are they actually achieving? And if, you know, particularly things like shuffling papers and you know, ensuring compliance and updating stakeholders and clients about site progress and that kind of thing, if you can just entrust that to an AI, you know, once an hour, once a day, once a week, it delivers an up-to-date report complete with drone surveys. Here's the progress of the job. Do you really need those people shuffling papers? Mark Fitz has just said most of the time the overseer is less experienced. Yeah. You listen, you know, that's something we talk about a lot on this show, the idea of somebody coming around and telling you how to do your job that they've never done, but they've read it in a book. AI would be the same, but it would be an all-seeing eye. And I think, you know, if it were trained properly, you know, to understand that people do need to take a pee from every once in a while, that people do occasionally stop to have a bite to eat or a cigarette or whatever it might be, not a major problem. I think it's where it becomes intrusive that it becomes a major issue. And it's a conversation that needs to be had. You know, this isn't going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next week. It may not happen for a few years. But you'd have to think it is coming. It is coming. And I don't get the impression anybody is actually thinking about, you know, the ethics of it. On the subject of ethics, and I realise AI and autonomy are two sides of the same coin. There is only one company so far that has mentioned to me the ethical potential ethical downside of autonomy, and that's Bobcat. I interviewed one of their guys, and I'm planning to do the same again, actually, talking about all things autonomy. And they were, oh, we could do this and we could do that, but we are very, very conscious of the potential ethics of this. You know, we are fully cognizant of the fact that if we push too hard on autonomy, it will cost jobs, and we don't want to be doing that. Yeah. Mark Fitz says, best thing about the future is full auto grease. Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice, eh? And Gary Goldsbridge just joined us. Morning, Gary. How you doing, my friend? Haven't seen you for a long, long while. Mike Woof. No, hang on a minute. The new mother, father watch. The kid in every... the new mother, father, watch the kid in every move. Have a wonderful weekend, guys. Stay safe. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misread that first bit. Yes, enjoy your Monday. I hope to see you then, he says. Keep fingers crossed. See you Monday. Mike Bush, back to Mike. Ford had cameras that would take photos of people when they went for the toilet break and when they came out, showing a clock face in the frame. It was crude compared to new AI technology. There was a whole division of people paid to check the times of the production line staff spent taking breaks. It was then realised within Ford that this system caused more problems than it solved and cost more. The thing about history is that we often don't learn from it, and all this new technology, AI technology, could repeat, and it peters out after that. I kind of know where that's going. Jim says, when I was a nipper and I held my plate for another spoon of food, I'd get told to get the dump truck closer and to the loading shovel. That's how I've always been taught. One of the joys of coming from a family with a construction background. But, you know, I've been through things like, you know, Caterpillar training and stuff. And, you know, they've got it down to, I mean, literally, I mean, Mike will back me up on this because he spent a lot of time talking about mining equipment in his past life. You know, Caterpillar will show you, you know, if you've got a dump truck there and you're loading like that, so full 180 degrees, it will cost you that in fuel. If you put the dump truck there, so you're only doing that, it will cost you that less half. And, you know, given the cost of fuel as it is today, both financial and from an emission standpoint, you know, we are talking about massive savings. And that's not just confined to mining. It's quarrying, it's construction, it's demolition, it's waste handling, and so on. And as Dan is just going out the door, Peter says, "Bye, Danny boy." There's a song about that, isn't there? When I held my plate out for another helping of food, I always get told, "Bloody hell, you've had 5 servings already." Yeah, I was a bit like that myself. Anyway, people, that is an hour. I need to go and talk about music videos, bizarrely. I don't know. It's just these things that you get involved in. I'll be back here on Monday to talk about something completely different. Hope that's given you some food for thought. If anybody in your, that employs you or that pays your wages comes along and says, "We're going to kit out your cab with AI," ask the question. Yeah, I'm okay with that, but is it monitoring me or is it monitoring the machine? And if it's monitoring me, what are you going to do with that? And Yvonne Waterman just says, "Yes, Den Bosch, beautiful historical city with a huge cathedral." Yvonne, good morning. Here's how I travel. I've been to Den Bosch definitely 4 times, quite possibly 5. Had no notion whatsoever there was a cathedral, because that's how you tend to travel for business. Fly to Schiphol, get on a train, go to a factory, get out of the factory, get on a train, get to the airport, fly home. Didn't even know. Next time I'm there, and I am planning to go there because I was speaking to one of their guys when I was in Italy. I am planning to head that way. I will make a point. I will make a point of going to the cathedral. And Yvonne, as you told me about it, I may even light a candle in your honour. Is that a thing you do in cathedrals? No, I'm not the guy. Who knows? Mark Fitz has just said, "Stay safe." Mark, you too, my friend. Everybody, please stay safe because, we need the audience numbers. I'll be back Monday, 10 a.m. for yet more of the same. Till then, everybody, look after yourselves. Have a good